Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this 15-minute education program. My name is Jennifer Searfoss, and I see a number of you that have joined. I am so glad that you were able to join me today. I am the CEO of the Searfoss Consulting Group putting on this presentation, and today we're going to cover what you need to know about business associate agreements. At the end of the presentation, I will cover your questions. If you notice on your sidebar when you logged into the webinar, there is a chat area. Feel free to go ahead and type a message directly there. If there's other issues that you run into on whether or not you can hear me or if the slides are not progressing, please also send those messages through the chat feature, as I am not answering my cell phone right now. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Again, only in 15 minutes. For those of you who are familiar with my presentations, this is going to be a whirlwind, as I do have a tendency to talk, but I also do have a tendency to talk fast. So I'm going to do my best here to make sure that we cover the highlights of what you need to know, and also that you walk away with your homework after this. So let's get started. What we're going to cover today is regarding just BA agreements. We're going to cover what is a business associate agreement. I'll give you a brief overview of the HIPAA Mega Rule and specifically what it has to do with the business associate agreements. I'll go into the new requirements and then give you some homework. So in 15 minutes, you are going to get the best crash course, hopefully, that you can get on this. So let's get down to business. So if you're not familiar with business associate agreements, I did provide you the geeky legal references to the CFR, so feel free if you have some time today, you want to get into those, feel free to do so. But if you aren't familiar, this first came out of the HIPAA privacy rule, and this says that any covered entity, and I've given you the definition here, but covered entities are required to have written agreements with their contractors when they are in any way, shape, or form having access to health information, also known as protected health information. So just as a quick refresher, covered entities are going to be healthcare providers, so medical practices, be it solo, group practices, hospitals. It also covers your clearinghouses and your health plans. So covered entities is very broad, but the way that they bring you into being into the fold is that you do an electronic transaction. So if you submit claims even through a clearinghouse, through an electronic transaction, which quite honestly is everybody in the United States now, you are a covered entity and fall under the auspices of the HIPAA privacy rule. So as part of that, again, it's not just the covered entity, but it's the contractors that they work with. So an agent like myself is either a consultant or a lawyer, but also others that are involved in health information. Again, protected health information, so this is going to be information that is particular to a patient and is healthcare in nature. So one of the big things, too, is that you can't just have an agreement, but basically you have to have the business associates making satisfactory assurances that they are going to appropriately safeguard the protected health information. So all the way from the fact that they have systems that are secure, but also that they have locks on their doors and everything that's required from covered entities. That's really what we get into right now, is that there was some expansion in this area, so it's a really big deal. So what I wanted to also give you some examples of what a business associate was under the previous rule, because they did expand it. So again, some examples here are going to be your billing companies, so anybody who's doing billing, obviously the clearinghouses who are either receiving your electronic transactions, but also maybe they're manipulating your data for you, so this could be your electronic EOBs, also your eligibility and benefits for patients, anything like that that's an electronic transaction. They're also business associate. Transcription, this is a great example, again, protected health information in there. Let's say that your EMR has a help desk and they have the opportunity to see data either through the help desk or through a data repository that you're using either for meeting meaningful use reporting requirements or the PQRS quality reporting. Also, if they're doing any claims that are a flow-through, guess what? That's also going to mean that they're a BA. One of the best examples I have, and again, people often forget about it, is that there was a law firm that actually was cited for business associate infringements and had to pay civil monetary penalties because they didn't have any BA agreements and there was a breach. They disclosed data without having that agreement and assurances that they were meeting the minimum requirements. So guess what? Your CPAs, your law firms, consultants, anybody that's working on things like claims audits, utilization review, anything like that, if they're seeing protected health information, that's going to be a business associate. So real quick, I wanted to give you a poll. if you can, please go ahead and give me an idea of how many business associates you have. And I'm going to keep this open for just a little bit longer, so if you can please go ahead and vote, that would be great. Actually, I'm giving you the wrong one. Let me give you the right one. How about that one? Yay, I remember how to work all of this. Great. So if you can go ahead and vote, that would be fantastic. All right, so it looks like we have a lot of groups that have some really significant numbers of business associates. So this task that you're going to be looking at is going to be really significant. So this is great. Appreciate that. And we'll get into some of the other polls that I've got for you here a little bit later. All right, so let me get back to the presentation here. All right, so moving on. Let's get into a little bit more about the BA agreement. So for those of you who haven't seen these before, again, just a quick refresher. One is that it has to be in writing. That's actually in the regulations and something that's required. But one of the big things also to think about, too, is that it needs to describe how your contractor is actually using the PHI. So again, as a consultant or an attorney, for me, usually I'm looking at a claim, and I'm either trying to figure out how it breached contract or looking at other aspects of it. So I talk about how I may be touching PHI that's related to claims, also into ICD-10 and CPT codes and other things like that. But again, generally the claims that I'm getting are one by one versus a huge volume. So it does talk about how I'm using the data and other disclosures I may make, for example, back to a payer saying, hey, I've got these claims and that there's a problem. The second thing is that how you need to make an attestation as part of the business associate agreement that they are not going to use or further disclose PHI more than it's already in the contract, or let's say that they were contacted by law enforcement because there was some questions about, I don't know, minor, basically concerns about a minor patient. So there's certain things that under law they would have to disclose, but again, those are laid out very clearly and you can put those in your BAs. Also, again, appropriate safeguards, we talked about this. So this is all the way from locks to passwords to just looking at ways to safeguard the information. And then again, if there's a material breach, the BA basically needs to tell the covered entity, and that was what it was before, was that if the BA screwed up, so let's say, for example, you had a billing company and they had sent a bunch of records to either be shredded or it was an off-site secure location, and somehow those documents didn't make it there and they got lost. Or my favorite, which is that they ended up in the garbage instead of being shredded. In those instances, they would need to tell the covered entity. And that's the way it was before January 25th. It changed. So we'll get into that next. But also one of the big things here is if that happened, guess what? The covered entity, so your practice, would have the opportunity to terminate the agreement. And it's somewhat dated now, but there is a sample BA agreement on the Office of Civil Rights website. So on January 25th, I got some great reading material. I know that you all picked it up yourselves and fell asleep with it. But the Office of Civil Rights came out with the known as the Mega Rule. And the reason that it came out with the quote-unquote Mega Rule, and the reason we call it that is because there's actually 4 rules in this publication in the Federal Register. So I've given you the citation again if you want to go and read it. It's fantastic reading. But the real reason that this is so important was that there was requirements in high tech. So this is the bill that came out in 2009 that was in the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. But the high-tech requirements, we didn't really know what those meant and how to have them implemented. So the 4 rules came out, and the rule is effective March 26th, so in about actually a month from today. And a part of it, though, and this is what we're going to get into, is that the new requirements that are out there for business associates and for covered entities, everybody has to be compliant by September 23rd of this year. So I'm not covering a number of the other requirements for your practice. Likely I'm going to do that in a future session. But what I wanted to highlight for you is that these requirements are going to be for BAs very quickly. So why does this matter? Well, the rule expanded as part of high tech who is a business associate. And the reason that this matters is that they use the word maintain. And again, the word maintain wasn't really that big a deal until we started thinking about it. So if you think about who is maintaining your data, so if you have an electronic data repository that you're using for storage of your information, So for instance, I have a vendor that I use that is Dropbox. Guess what? I now have to contact them because I have them as a subcontractor and I'm a business associate. I have to get an agreement with them, a business associate agreement with them about all of this. So things to think about. Your e-prescribing vendors, if you don't have any agreements with them, those are new ones. All of your patient portals, also any personal health record. So again, really a patient portal that you're working with, those also fall under the BA definition. If there's a third party you're using just for the transmission of data, and they're keeping the data and maintaining it so that they're storing it longer than just a quick transmittal, they also fall into that, and they're subcontractors. We'll talk about subcontractors. This is a really big deal. So again, as a business associate, my subcontractors now have to be covered under HIPAA, and I have to have a BA agreement with them. But that's the responsibility of the BA, not of the covered entity. So things for you to ask about. Also your cloud vendors, if you're using anyone for cloud work, that's a really big deal. We did get some information, though, and I'm really excited about this. So your couriers are not subcontractors, so don't worry about them. So you don't need to have a business associate agreement with, like, the U.S. Postal Service or FedEx. In the same way, you don't need to have currently, unless they are keeping your data, you don't need to have business associate agreements with anyone who's hosting your internet. So even though there's transactions that are happening on it, they're not storing your data. So Verizon, Comcast, you don't have to have agreements with them. I say yet, but again, we'll see. So moving through this, again, I knew I'd be pressed, but let's get to this. So BAs are now going to include, again, the subcontractors. It is the requirements, the business associate to get those BA agreements. And all business associates now are being held accountable for the requirements under the security rule to protect electronic PHI, so they need to have firewalls and other things out there. And also they now stand in the shoes of a covered entity for liability. So for civil monetary penalties, they actually may have liability for that, although the covered entity likewise may also have liability, depending on the facts and circumstances of the case. Also, again, BAs now will have to report directly to HHS if they've got a breach, so long as it falls into the reporting requirements under the rule. So there's some really significant new changes. And they have to, as a business associate, they have to be ready for these by September 23rd. I'm going to let you know right now, your vendors don't know about this. So you likely are going to be the first person that is calling them about this. They now need to keep records to demonstrate their compliance. This is all new. They need to make sure that they are doing everything possible to only disclose PHI as required under law or through the contract, but also if, as a covered entity, you got an individual's request for electronic copy of their PHI, they need to be able to respond. They also need to do minimum necessary. This is a really big deal. Not everybody is. And then they also need to keep an accounting of disclosures. Really big deal. A lot of BAs are not doing that. So again, please keep this in mind because they don't know about it. So what do you need to do? One, first off, make sure you have a list of all of your business associates. So going back through that expanded list, who are your business associates, and then who are your new business associates. Make sure that you have a copy of the current BA agreement and that you have it somewhere that's housed so that you can go back to look at it. And again, just validate the language that it meets the requirements before January 15th. If you haven't already, reach out to them and say, are you going to be compliant with these new requirements? You know, this is a really big deal, and they need to be required, meeting these requirements by September 23rd. Look for gaps in the revision of the BA agreement. Hopefully the business associate is working on this and revising the agreements themselves, but again, this may be something that they turn to you to. You've got a year. So you have for existing agreements, September 22nd, 2014 is where you have. But for those new business associates that are out there, especially under the expanded language, you need to make sure that you have the new agreements that are done. So make sure that those are out there. And again, you have until September 22nd for existing and basically now for all of the others. So with that, I do want to just quickly ask another question for you. Because, again, it's somewhat related to some of the things that I'm doing. But at this time, if you've got any questions, please go ahead and put them into the chat box, and I can answer your questions. But in the meantime, if you could go ahead and answer this quick poll that I have here about meaningful use, that would be great. Excellent. All right, and I have one more question for you about these sessions because I want to make sure that I have these at the right time of day. So if you can just let me know for any future sessions that I have what time of day you would prefer, that would be fantastic. But in the meantime, any other questions that are coming up? I don't see any that are here. All right. So with that, again, we're hitting right at 15 minutes. I try to warn you that this is going to be a really quick session, but hopefully you're able to see again what your homework is. So let me just toss that back up. I will have this homework slide for you on my website so that you'll have, again, what you need to do at the end of all of this. So that's great. One last thing, I do have just a brief survey for you. If you are able to take that, it'll pop up right here after this, and it will help me make sure that I offer programs that are helpful to you. So thank you so much for joining me today for the 15-minute education program. This concludes the presentation. Again, please take the time to go ahead and take that survey. But right now, you can go ahead and leave the meeting and hang up. Thanks so much.